All characters and events are fictional. Any resemblance is coincidental, and if you believe that every lie eventually leaves proof, stay with me. The room smelled like money, not perfume, not flowers, money. That sterile mix of polished wood, leather chairs, and recycled air that tells you this is a place where people lose things quietly. No clocks on the walls, no windows close enough to see the street, just a long table, 3 folders, and my marriage laid out in black ink. Across from me, my husband leaned back in his chair, relaxed, one arm draped over the armrest like this was a negotiation he'd already won. Daniel Cross, 11 years married, and he looked at me the way men look at furniture they've decided to replace. Beside him sat his attorney, flipping through documents with mechanical efficiency, the kind of man who never says names, only case numbers. And then Daniel spoke, calm, measured, almost kind. "You'll leave with nothing," he said, not angry, not raised voice, just final, like gravity. Like a fact already decided. I didn't react. That surprised him. Because Daniel was used to reactions. He fed on them. Anger meant control. Tears meant victory. Silence meant weakness. But I wasn't silent because I was weak. I was silent because I was listening. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice as if he were doing me a favor. "You don't need to fight this, Ava. You don't have the leverage you think you do." Leverage. That word. Men like Daniel love that word. It makes cruelty sound professional. I looked down at the folder in front of me. My name printed neatly at the top. Pages clipped. Tabs marked. Everything prepared without me ever being asked. This wasn't a conversation. It was a performance. And Daniel was already at the curtain call. "My name is Ava Hart. I'm 36 years old, and for most of my adult life, people described me the same way. Reliable, easygoing, low maintenance, which is a polite way of saying she won't push back. I work in compliance, not glamorous, not loud. I track things people hope never get traced. Signatures, timelines, financial trails that only exist if you know where to look. And if my job has taught me anything, it's this. When someone tells you there's nothing left, it's because they've already moved it." Daniel knew what I did for a living, which made it fascinating that he still believed I wouldn't notice. From the outside, our marriage looked boring, stable, predictable, the kind of relationship friends stop checking in on. And that's exactly how Daniel liked it, because boredom is camouflage. He ran a private investment firm. I handled regulatory compliance for a mid-size corporation. We kept work separate, at least that's what he told me. The changes didn't come with screaming or slammed doors. They never do. They came quietly, Daniel correcting me in front of other people. Subtle things. "Ava overthinks. She worries too much. She's not great with numbers like I am." Each comment gentle, each one shaving a little credibility off my name. He started handling the finances to simplify things. Moved accounts, consolidated statements, changed passwords, always with a smile, always with reassurance, and always with urgency. "You trust me, right?" That question is never innocent. It wasn't when I found suspicious transfers. It wasn't when he stopped touching me. It was the night he said something that didn't belong. We were sitting at the kitchen counter, wine untouched. He was scrolling through his phone. And without looking up he said, "If we ever divorced, you'd be fine. You don't really need much. Not hypothetical, not joking. Planned." I remember the way my body reacted before my mind did. A tightening. A warning. Because people don't imagine your life without them unless they've already rehearsed it. I didn't confront him. I never confront when I don't yet have the map. I waited. Daniel asked for the divorce on a Tuesday. Not after a fight, not after an argument. After dinner, clean, prepared, emotionless. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," he said. Of course he had. He slid a folder across the table, the same one now sitting in front of me. Assets divided, numbers neat, concessions minimal, and that's when he said it again. "You'll leave with nothing." He smiled when he said it, not cruel, confident, the smile of a man who believes the story is already written. What Daniel never understood about me is that I don't fight when I'm emotional. I fight when I'm sure, and certainty doesn't come from feelings. It comes from patterns, because patterns don't lie. People do. So while he was busy rehearsing this moment, I was auditing my marriage, quietly, carefully, line by line, and somewhere between shell companies, internal transfers, and a signature that didn't belong, I found something, not proof yet, but a fracture. And fractures, when pressured long enough, become breaks. Daniel tapped the folder with his finger, a small gesture, possessive. "Sign Ava," he said. "Let's be adults about this." I picked up the pen, my hand steady, and that's when he made his final mistake. He relaxed, because men like Daniel believe the moment you stop arguing, you've already surrendered. He didn't know that surrender isn't quiet. Preparation is. I signed the first page, then the second. His shoulders loosened. The attorney didn't look up. And that's when my lawyer, who had been silent the entire time, finally spoke. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough to shift the air. "Before we conclude," he said calmly, "there's one document we need to enter into record." Daniel frowned, just slightly, not fear, annoyance, like an unexpected speed bump. My lawyer reached into his briefcase and pulled out one envelope, thick, sealed, official. He placed it on the table and slid it forward. Not to Daniel, to me. Daniel's smile didn't disappear, not yet, but something in his eyes did. Confidence doesn't vanish all at once. It fractures first. Daniel didn't react to the envelope, not immediately. That was his strength, and his flaw. He believed control meant composure. So he leaned back again, crossing his arms, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "This isn't necessary," he said lightly. "We're already done here." My lawyer didn't respond. He never responds to noise. Silence makes men like Daniel nervous. I could feel it, the way his foot tapped once under the table, then stopped. The attorney beside him glanced at the envelope, then at Daniel, a micro look, professional concern. Daniel noticed it too. But instead of asking questions, he did what he always did. He redirected. "Ava," he said, turning to me, softening his voice. "This doesn't need to get messy." Messy, another favorite word. Messy means witnesses. Messy means records. Messy means things you can't clean up later. And Daniel hated mess. Let me rewind. Because Daniel didn't build this confidence overnight. It came from believing he had everyone mapped, including me, including her. Her name was Camille. That's how I first heard it. Not from him, from an email. An internal email forwarded by mistake, addressed to a consulting firm I'd never heard of. The subject line was harmless. RE, for Guatemalan quetzals adjustments. The signature wasn't C, just an initial. That alone meant nothing. But patterns don't work alone. They work in clusters. Camille started appearing everywhere Daniel did. Business dinners, industry mixers, fundraisers he suddenly needed to attend. She never stood beside him, never touched him. She stayed just far enough away to look professional, but close enough to be constant. And that's when I realized something important. She wasn't the affair, she was the operation. Most women would have. I didn't. Because confrontation gives people time to clean. Instead, I watched. Camille spoke when Daniel paused, finished his sentences, corrected people gently, and every time she did, Daniel let her. That told me more than any text message ever could. She wasn't just sleeping with him, she was managing him. And men like Daniel don't surrender control emotionally. They surrender it strategically. When I began auditing our finances, the first thing I found was nothing. Clean accounts, balanced ledgers, no obvious missing funds. That's where most people stop. Because clean numbers feel reassuring, but clean numbers can be curated. So I went backwards, 6 years, then 8, and that's where I found it. A company that didn't exist when we married. A consulting entity formed quietly, registered under a generic address, no website, no staff, no public-facing business, but plenty of money flowing through it. Always just under reporting thresholds, always routed through intermediary accounts, always clean, too clean, and always authorized by 2 signatures. One was Daniel's, the other wasn't mine. I stared at that signature for a long time, because it looked like mine, close enough that no one would question it casually, but wrong in the details. The loop of the A, the pressure on the downstroke, small things, the kind only someone trained to notice inconsistencies would see. Someone like me. Daniel never considered that possibility. He thought of my job as boring, paperwork, compliance. He didn't realize compliance is where lies go to die. My lawyer slid the envelope back toward himself, still unopened, still sealed. Daniel's attorney cleared his throat. "Is there a legal reason this hasn't been shared prior to today?" he asked. My lawyer nodded once. "Yes." Daniel leaned forward now. "Care to explain?" My lawyer didn't look at him. He looked at me and said, calmly, "This document exists because my client was told she would leave with nothing." Daniel smiled again, tighter this time, which is still true. I finally spoke. My voice didn't shake. "That depends," I said, "on how you define nothing." For the first time, Camille shifted in her seat, just slightly. She hadn't spoken once yet, but she was listening. Closely. Daniel assumed this meeting was about divorce, division, assets, ego. He didn't realize that while he was preparing to erase me, I was preparing to document him. Not emotionally, legally, because divorce can be negotiated. Fraud cannot, and fraud leaves fingerprints no one expects, like timestamps, email headers, authorization logs buried so deep no one checks them, except people like me. I could have exposed him earlier. I chose not to, because timing matters. Evidence hits harder when the liar is relaxed, when they think they've already won. Daniel was relaxed, confident. He'd already practiced the story he'd tell people later. She didn't fight. She agreed. She signed. He never imagined the signing was the trap. Camille finally spoke, soft voice, controlled. "This feels unnecessary," she said. Ava already agreed. I turned to her, really looked at her and smiled that confused her, because she thought she knew me. "She didn't agree to fraud," my lawyer said calmly. The word landed hard. Fraud. Daniel's smile froze, not gone, frozen, like a mask glued to skin. "Careful," Daniel said. "You're making accusations." My lawyer nodded again. "Yes," he said, "and I'm about to support them." He placed his hand on the envelope, didn't open it, just rested there. The room changed, because now Daniel understood something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't about leaving with nothing anymore. This was about what staying would cost him. The envelope stayed closed. That was intentional. Proof doesn't scare people on its own. Anticipation does. Daniel's lawyer shifted in his chair. "Not much. Just enough to signal discomfort. You're alleging financial misconduct," he said carefully. "If you intend to introduce evidence, we'll need—" My lawyer raised a hand. "Of course," he said calmly. "But first, I'd like to clarify something for the record." He turned to Daniel. "Mr. Hart, when did you decide your wife would leave with nothing?" Daniel scoffed. "That's not how divorce works," he said. "This is a mutual agreement." My lawyer nodded. "And yet," he replied, "you told her that exact sentence 3 days ago. In your kitchen. At 9:14 p.m., silence." Daniel blinked, once, then laughed. "That's ridiculous. I didn't move, because I remembered that moment perfectly, the way he'd said it casually, almost kindly, like he was doing me a favor by being honest. Daniel leaned back again, trying to regain control. "You were reaching," he said, "and frankly, this feels like intimidation." My lawyer turned one page in his folder. "There's more than one way to document intent," he said. "Audio is just one of them." Camille stiffened. That wasn't subtle. Her fingers curled against the table, Daniel noticed. And that's when the cracks began to show. Because Daniel didn't trust Camille the way she trusted him. He trusted systems, paper, control. People were expendable. Daniel turned to me. Soft again. "Ava," he said, "this doesn't have to go further." That tone, the one he used when he wanted me to doubt myself. "We both know you tend to overanalyze," he added gently. "You're emotional right now." Camille nodded slightly, barely. A silent reinforcement. And that's when I knew exactly what they planned to do next. They were going to discredit me, paint this as instability, overreaction, a bitter wife inventing stories. It was an old play, and it only works when there's no paper trail. My lawyer didn't look at me. He didn't need to. He addressed the mediator directly. "For clarity," he said, "my client works in compliance. She doesn't speculate. She documents." Daniel's jaw tightened. The word compliance bothered him, because it meant oversight. And oversight is what people like him fear most. My lawyer finally broke the seal, slowly, deliberately. He didn't dump the contents out. He removed a single document, just one, and slid it across the table. Not to Daniel, to his lawyer. "This," my lawyer said, "is a transfer authorization dated 6 months before the divorce filing." Daniel's lawyer scanned it, once, then again, slower. His expression changed, not panic, recognition. "This signature," my lawyer continued, "belongs to my client. Or appears to." Daniel laughed again. "That proves nothing." My lawyer nodded. "Correct," he said, "by itself." Camille finally spoke. "This is absurd," she said sharply. "People sign things all the time." My lawyer turned to her. "You're right," he said, "which is why we examined patterns." Another document slid out, then another, authorization logs, email confirmations, internal routing memos, all stamped, all time-stamped, all consistent. And then, Camille's initials. Not her full name, just enough to avoid casual detection, but enough to tie her to every transfer. Camille froze. Daniel didn't look at her. He looked at me. And for the first time there was something new in his eyes. Calculation. He was already deciding who to sacrifice. "This has nothing to do with Ava," Daniel said quickly. "She handled paperwork occasionally. I delegated." My lawyer raised an eyebrow. "You delegated forgery?" he asked. The room went still. Camille stood up. "This is a misunderstanding," she said, voice tight. "Daniel told me everything was approved." Daniel turned slowly. "What?" he asked. Camille looked at him. "You said she signed," she said. "You said this was clean." Daniel didn't respond. He adjusted his cufflink, a small gesture. "But I knew him." That was his tell. Daniel finally spoke. "This is getting out of hand," he said. "We're done here." He stood up, so did my lawyer. "You are," my lawyer said calmly. "But the record isn't." Daniel's lawyer stayed seated. That was important. Camille noticed. Her confidence collapsed in layers. "You said she wouldn't notice," Camille whispered. "You said she was." Daniel cut her off. "Stop. Too late." The mediator was already typing notes. The room no longer belonged to Daniel. It belonged to the evidence. Camille looked at me. Really looked. Not with superiority. With fear. "You knew," she said softly. "Yes," I replied. "And you still smiled." That broke her. Not dramatically. Internally. The kind of break that doesn't heal quickly. Camille sat back down slowly. Not because anyone told her to. Because her legs stopped trusting her. Daniel was still standing. Hands on the back of his chair. Jaw tight. Eyes moving too fast. He had lost control of the room, and he knew it. But men like Daniel don't collapse immediately. They negotiate. This doesn't need to become public, Daniel said calmly. His voice had shifted, lower, measured, the voice he used with investors. Withdrawing claims benefits everyone. My lawyer didn't respond right away. Silence makes people talk. We can restructure the settlement, Daniel continued. Generously. That word, generously. As if generosity hadn't been a weapon for years, Camille stared at him. You're offering her money? She asked. Daniel didn't look at her. I'm protecting the firm, he replied. And that was the moment Camille finally understood. She was never his future. She was his firewall. You said you loved me, Camille whispered. Daniel exhaled slowly. This isn't about feelings. Her laugh came out sharp and broken. You built this with me, she said. You used me. Daniel's eyes hardened. You were useful, he said flatly. The mediator stopped typing. My lawyer closed his folder. The room had crossed a line. My lawyer stood. For clarity, he said. The envelope contains copies already submitted to federal compliance oversight. Daniel froze. Federal, he repeated. Yes, my lawyer replied. Because concealment, forgery, and pre-divorce asset diversion are not civil issues. Daniel's color drained. Camille stood up again. You told me this was legal, she said, voice rising. You said she signed everything. Daniel finally looked at her and said nothing. That silence was her answer. Phones vibrated. Not mine. Daniel's. Then his lawyer's. Then Camille's. Daniel checked his screen. Once. Then again. Accounts are frozen, he said quietly. The mediator stood. This meeting is concluded, she said, and the record will reflect attempted financial fraud. Daniel looked at me, not angry, desperate. Ava, he said softly. We can still talk. I stood, slow, calm, because power had finally changed sides. You were right, I said. I am leaving with nothing. He blinked. I'm leaving with nothing to hide. Daniel's firm collapsed in stages. First the board, then the investors, then the audit notices. Camille cooperated, not out of loyalty, out of survival. She testified, handed over everything. She wasn't charged that day. But her name never recovered. Daniel tried to fight, he always did. But paper doesn't argue, and evidence doesn't forget. 3 weeks later, Daniel left a voicemail, not angry, tired. I never thought you'd do this, he said. I deleted it. Because revenge isn't listening. It's moving forward. People think divorce is about love. It isn't. It's about leverage. And the person who reads quietly wins. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to The Final Evidence. Because every lie leaves proof.